Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we have today one of the premier creators on, we'll say, TikTok and other places. He makes people laugh a lot, and his creativity shines a light of truth, we'll say, on the corporation, we'll call it. Thanks for coming on the show, Cultch.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while, and Maven texted me the other day and I said, what the hell? Let's just do it tonight. Let's do this.
Yeah. When Cultch was in middle school, I wrote him a letter and said, I think I'm going to start a podcast in 25 years. Would you come on? I said, not yet. I'm not ready.
What's the spread between us, Gene? What's the age difference here?
I'm going to say 20 years, almost exactly, because you're 45.
Maybe.
Birthday party.
Yeah.
That was the birthday party. Was it only the after show that knew how old you were, or did you say at the end of your?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I dropped it during the. I can't remember. I definitely did during the after show.
There was question and answer.
Yes, there was. I don't know if I did or not.
At the end of the show,
I can't remember. I guess know that
if people want to know, they need to go back and watch the whole episode again. And if they don't find out, then they need to join Patreon and watch the after show.
Everybody says that you look 27, so it doesn't really matter.
There you go.
It's not how you feel, it's how you look.
Look. I've been told my whole life that I look younger than I am, and it's finally paying off now that I'm in my midlife crisis.
It's the baseball cap, the backwards baseball cap.
That helps. But even with it off, I still look young.
Get it. Me too, actually. Like right before my mission, so I'm 21. I had already hit 21, and I was babysitting my cousins, but I hadn't been feeling well, so I just was wearing this like big old hoodie, and someone knocked on the door, so I came to answer it, and they saw me, and they're like, "Is your mom or dad home?" And I was like,
"Oh no,
I'm 21." Yeah. Like it was really awkward. Yeah,
that's fun.
There was a time I was trying to I was trying to get a job, and this was back in good old Hurricane, and I was doing the pound the pavement, like actually go in and ask for a paper application thing. So I went into one store. So I was 20 then. So I'm trying to find a job like before the mission to kind of try to save up some money. I go into this, I think it was like a little local hardware kind of shop, kind of store. I go in, I ask for an application, and the guy just looks at me like he kind of sighs, and he like leans over the counter, and he's like, you have to be at least 16 to work here. No. And I was like, I'm 20. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. So he like gave me the paper, but I never went back. I was so embarrassed. Like not even 16. He's like, you have to be at least 16 to work here. And I was just like, no, this is terrible. But yeah, no, it's starting to pay off now. I don't mind when people think that I'm younger. Right. So
that's good.
I'm going to contrast that story with my daughter, and my daughter's name is Krista, and Maven knows Krista. And when Maven was in Girl Scouts, when she was 13, she was asked if she was driving for the next event.
You mean Krista was asked? You said Maven, but.
Oh, yeah. Krista was asked if she was going to drive for the next event. Like the girls were going to go somewhere far away. Mm-hmm. And then she goes, no, I'm just a Girl Scout. And they go, oh, I thought you were a mom.
Oh, she looks older. Okay.
She was 13.
Dang.
She has a serious look on her face.
Maybe that's it.
Often. Yeah.
What is that look? I need to learn it.
Deer in the headlights.
Like that? Does that make me look older?
You do. You look like Uncle Fester on the Addams Family when you do that.
He's bald though.
If your hat was flesh color.
There you go.
So one thing.
If I could grow a beard, Gene, I think it would do a lot for me, make me look a little bit older, but I don't have the genes for it.
Does that mean you might have like Native American?
No, I don't. I'm just like all those like European countries where the white people are from. That's where I'm from. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
England, Ireland, Scotland. That I looked that I'm so white, or I look young.
Grow facial hair. I had an Asian boyfriend. The only boyfriend I've ever had was Japanese, and he just couldn't. I remember we watched what's the movie with Pedro in it? I'm so embarrassed now. Napoleon Dynamite. Yeah. Okay, we're watching Napoleon Dynamite, and so there's the scene where Napoleon is asking like how long it took him to grow his mustache. He's like a couple of days. And I remember my boyfriend just being like, just like making this noise, like,
Mhm.
that's not fair, because it doesn't matter
Yeah.
how many days he tries, he can't. But I feel like guys younger, my brother or both of my brothers were quite proud of themselves when they could grow facial hair. I think for the manliness.
It's a big thing for guys. It's a huge milestone. I've never gotten to it, so I don't know how huge it is, but it's pretty big.
But you've never cared, and that kind of goes into, I think one thing that I brought up before and wanted to bring up is that you just seem like a very chill, laid back guy. So were you always this way? How did you get this way? What are your tips?
I don't know if it's genetics, because I have siblings who are definitely not chill. It could be the church. I don't know. I was just I'm the fifth kid out of six. So I was kind of a mama's boy, and I was just
hand-me-downs.
Oh yeah. I was getting, my oldest brother would hand down to the next brother, and then when he grew out of it, it would come to me.
Did you guys have family pictures where your older brother's wearing the shirt, and the next year you're wearing that shirt, and the next year the next brother's wearing that shirt?
I think when we did family pictures when I was a kid, Gene, we would get matching outfits for all the boys and all the girls, because we got 3 boys and 3 girls. We had the nice like Brady Bunch sort of split.
Right.
We would usually get the 3 boys all next to each other and the 3 girls.
But how does being fifth out of 6 lead to chill? Because it seems that like
I don't know that it does,
like
to be honest.
And younger kids have more of like an attention seeking kind of vibe, or they're more, I think, comedic. Well, they are funny, so maybe that's where you get your.
You have to wait your turn.
Oh, you do. Yeah, I think maybe the hand-me-down stuff is part of that, Gene, because I was used to not getting anything. Even now, I don't ask for things. So even if I wanted something, I would just assume my parents wouldn't give it to me, and I would just be too afraid to even ask. So my chill was just like, I'm scared to talk almost in some situations, or I'm afraid of being turned down, whether that's from my parents or, from a friend asking for something, or from a girl. Yeah. So my thing was, I'm just going to hang back, and if they want to come to me, I'll engage. And if they don't, that's how I got most of my girlfriends in high school. Like they would just come up and be like, my friend thinks you're cute. Oh yeah, that's cool. And then I was good to talk, but I didn't want to go, I didn't want to go to talk.
You weren't doing the first move on anybody.
Oh no, Gene. No. I waited to get the vibes. Like once I got the vibes, we were good to go. But I don't know. I was just kind of shy like that.
That's what I was going to ask for you, an introvert, because a lot of you don't seem like it online, but also most people don't seem like it online. But I feel like a lot of us are actually introverts in real life that do quite well in these kind of scenarios. So
yes. So absolutely. I always had a friend group growing up, and they were usually the kids that I hung out with in choir, and like my church friends. All the kids in my stake that went to the same place. So I definitely had friends and people that I wanted to hang out with, but I don't know. I think if I didn't have the church that already set up that social group, I don't know how great I would have been at making friends. I think it helps that I'm not like a super weird person and not like a grotesque person. I probably would have had friends and stuff, but I think if I had been like a weird kid to go along with my introvert personality, that would have been a bad combo. But
so where did you grow up? In
Tucson, Arizona. I was a military brat, so most of my brothers and sisters were moving around every 2 years. But when I was born, I think we were in South Carolina and then Virginia, and we were in Korea for a little bit. Back to the States, to Virginia. And then when I was 8, we moved to Arizona, and that's where my dad ended up retiring. So I claim Tucson as the place that I grew up, because I started 2nd grade there and went all the way up through high school and my mission there. So that's where I claim this home.
There?
Yeah, I actually was. I turned 8 before we moved, but my dad had already had to go out. Yeah, he had to go out already, and he was waiting for us to go cross country.
Happened to me. My dad was in Germany a little bit before my 8th birthday. So during my 8th birthday, but it was on a Sunday. So I could have, if my dad had been there, I could have been baptized like after church. But so I got baptized in a brand new ward in Germany. It was a split ward. So it was half like the native German population of saints, and then the other half were all, you know, American military service members. So I didn't know a soul, but like they turned out like it pretty big too. Even though and the missionaries, like they translated almost everything. So like sacrament meeting, they would, if it was a German speaker, the missionaries would, you know, they would say a few lines and the missionary would stand up there like and just live translating everything. They did that for my baptism. So yeah, for just like a brand new kid that didn't know anyone, it was nice, I think, for everyone to turn up. And
so mine was cool. I got there and
you are
my dad,
second Tucsonian on our
show. Am I? Oh, that's right, because you had Kelby on.
Yeah, Kelby.
Yeah, Kelby was his family was in the same ward as me, which is pretty cool. But when I got to Tucson, so my dad got to baptize me, and I got baptized in a swimming pool of like a family in the ward that was in the same age group as me. So I remember that getting baptized in a swimming pool. That was pretty cool.
That'd be weird, because if they did the party as a pool party right after, it would feel kind of weird to have it be a sacred place. It would. And then
I feel like they did it on a Sunday. To be honest with you, I can't be sure. It was either a Saturday or a Sunday, but it had Sunday vibes to it.
Why not a font? Because I always thought that they only did like different bodies of water if like we didn't have our own chapel somewhere. So
I think this was before they kind of made that a hard rule.
Maybe, okay, before they locked.
I mean, we're talking 1988 here, which is a little bit back in the day. I know for a lot of people. Well, actually, Gene's audience is old, so everyone's probably like, "Oh yeah, I remember 1988. That was a great year." I was in high school. No, so I don't know. I don't remember why it happened, why we didn't use a font. That'd probably be a good question for my parents, but I thought it was always a cool story to say that I got baptized in a swimming pool, like right behind a diving board and stuff.
Oh, nice. For sure. Okay.
And then you were in deacons, teachers, and priests in Tucson still? Did you have any leadership positions?
Not really. I might have been like a first or second counselor in one of those, but I was never, I don't know. I'm not really a leader.
Introverts.
I was never, and that's probably why, to be honest with you, Maven, they probably thought like he doesn't talk enough or he's too shy or because for leadership, they want someone who would be considered like a red personality, you know, someone who's very goal oriented and just, you know, I'll tell you what to do.
Charismatic, gregarious. Yeah.
That was not me. I mean, I could be charismatic and gregarious, but I was more just like, you know, show up, tell me what we're doing. And I'm a great team player. Like any job I worked at, I was great because whatever role they gave me, they plugged me in and I was good to go. But anytime I had like, okay, you're in charge of these people, I'd be like, ooh, I don't like that very much. Just let me be in my spot and do my thing. So.
And so when did you start like choir or musical instruments or anything like that?
You know, I did not like singing, Gene. All my older siblings had been in choir, like as they went through high school. So my family was known as like a family that sang. If you talked about the insert Cultch's last name family here, everyone would be like, oh. So when I got to high school, I was like, I do not want to sing. So my freshman year in high school, I didn't join choir. I didn't want to do it. But my older sister, who was a senior, talked me into trying out at the end of the year. And I made like the advanced choir for the next year. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm okay. And I'll give this a shot. So sophomore year, junior year, and senior year, I all was doing choir. And then I also, what's that?
Instruments?
Guitar. So when I was a freshman, I was really into, I mean, this was 1994. So this was when like The Offspring and Weezer and like Bush and all those bands were first hitting. And I loved that music. And I was like, I gotta play, because if you play music, if you play guitar, you can get chicks. And so that was my goal, to play guitar and get chicks. So my dad always played guitar. So he gave me like an old acoustic and taught me a couple chords. And then they got me an electric for Christmas. And then I just taught myself how to play. So I had a couple bands I played in high school, nothing serious, but it was just kind of for fun. So choir and then guitar and playing in bands. And that was kind of the high school experience.
Nice. That's interesting, because just giving what you do, especially like with your TikToks and whatever, or maybe I'm in my mind, because I feel like I'm not talented in this area. What little music ability I have, I had to work very hard for, and I lose very quickly. But it seems like when you're like mixing tracks and you're making parodies of songs like that, I don't know, I was just thinking that you must have come from one of those really musical Mormon families where you were, playing piano at the age of 6 and everybody played piano and then probably had at least one other instrument on top of that, plus the choir and all that kind of stuff. But it seems like maybe you're I got some natural talent. I mean, you definitely have some family influence, but it seems maybe this stuff just kind of comes a little easy to you.
Yeah.
Not to minimize the work you do in putting these TikToks together. I think it's really very impressive. But
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think the family influence definitely was big on me. Like my mom was always the chorister. Or no, she was always the organist. And then my oldest sister, as soon as she was like old enough to have callings, they were plugging her as the chorister. So we'd have my mom and my older sister up there doing that. All my sisters played piano. So we were just a very musical family. So I think that is just kind of part of who I am. Okay. So it's kind of fun to work it into what I do now.
The ideal Mormon family to me growing up. Like I had this kind of image, and it definitely wasn't my Mormon family, but as I thought of myself, like, getting older and getting married to, of course, a returned missionary, very priesthood Mormon man. I had like a house with at least 2 levels, beige walls and white trim, the family pictures and the temple pictures, right? And some big Jesus picture from Deseret book, in there somewhere.
I think we had all that.
Like all the kids playing piano. That's like the basic. You make sure that they can play hymns, and then whatever musical ability or instrument on top of that. That to me was like the quintessential Mormon family. And the reason why you need a house with 2 levels is because you need either a basement or at least one of those second living room houses, so that you could be the place where you have activities, for young men, young women, scouts and stuff like that for kids to come over. That was my mental picture of what I was hoping for in the future. And it sounds like that's what you had. So we
had the 2-story house. They don't do basements in Arizona. Definitely not in Tucson, but we had a 2-story house.
Yeah, you at least got to have somewhere where there's like this gathering place where the kids can all come over, and you guys can be the cool family. But
nobody's accused Maven of having musical ability, right, Maven?
Right. I don't think I've been accused of such for good reason.
She's not even very good at tooting her own horn.
Yeah. I mean, I barely at Thrive publicly did karaoke, and that kind of took a lot. But I did have fun, and I'm glad I did it. But yeah, so moving on, because you did have a testimony. It seemed like you went on a mission. So how strong would you say your testimony was? Because in when we were talking about callings now, you said you're just kind of a team player, a plug and play.
Yeah.
So were you kind of a plug and play Mormon until, something happened to get a testimony, or did you always have this strong testimony while also just being chill and just kind of having this show up kind of vibe?
Like, was a mission always something you were going to do?
I think it was. Both my older brothers went. So on one hand, it kind of seemed like a family obligation to go, that everybody had gone, so I'd be letting people down if I didn't. But if I put myself back in my shoes, then I wanted to go. I think I was excited about it. My parents would have been fine if I didn't. It wouldn't have been the end of the world. They wouldn't have disowned me or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure they would have been disappointed, but they would have dealt with it.
Were you
No, not at all. I liked scouting up until I was 14. Like once I discovered girls, I got to high school and started having girlfriends and stuff, scouting went out the windows for me. I think I made it to star, and that was as far as I got. Yeah. So I didn't do the whole.
Where'd you go?
What's that?
Mission? Where'd you serve?
Oh, I was in the Philippines. The Philippines is where I served. But let me go back to Maven's thing real quick. So when I was 14 and started seminary, they were doing Book of Mormon. So that was my first time reading it all the way through. And I took Moroni's challenge, and I was excited to do that. And I didn't have any crazy experience. No angels appeared to me. I didn't hear heavenly voices or anything. But, as I prayed and I sat and I thought about it, it felt nice. So I was like, okay, there's my testimony that it's true. So I wrote.
You already know, that kind of an answer. That's how I interpreted the same kind of experience. Because I know, I'm being silly asking, even though the invite is there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I rode that 14-year-old experience all the way up to my mission. That was enough to get me there. And that even worked for, I'd say, the beginning part of my mission to the Philippines. But eventually I felt when I would share that with people that it wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't really an effective story. Our mission president was all about emotion when you were teaching investigators, especially in the first discussion. He wanted you to have a personal story. I forget the term he had for it, but he basically wanted you to paint a picture for them, kind of set up this very emotional story that they could picture. And then as you're testifying, he was also big on personal touch. Like we were taught, you were supposed to, as you were, I know this is true, you were supposed to reach over and touch the investigator, whether it was on the arm, on the leg, but that was taught to us. That was part of our missionary training, was as you bear your testimony, you will personal touch this person.
Yikes.
Yeah.
You know what? Like in on TV, when there's I remember like The Mentalist or other times when they're trying to hypnotize somebody, they touch them, right? As part of you will be a chicken, whatever.
Right.
And so there might be something about that, like you will be baptized.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that a lot? Did you feel super awkward when doing it, or did people? Do you have any stories?
It's awkward being a missionary is awkward at first, just learning how to teach the discussions. And I mean, at first there's a language barrier. So you feel like an idiot to start with, because one, you barely understand what anyone is saying. And you're supposed to sit here and teach these discussions to people who were probably like cringing at how bad my Tagalog was at the time. But once you get used to it and you learn the discussions, and I don't know, it doesn't, I guess that's like anything in the church. It all seems awkward at first, but if you do it enough, then you're just kind of like, oh yeah, this is totally normal. I bear testimony and I touch this person and then I invite them to be baptized. And that's just what we do. And honestly, Maven, it worked really well in our mission. Our mission was one of the highest baptizing missions in the whole world. You'd leave your mission. Some missionaries were baptizing 150 people on their mission. So it was not a lot of it stayed, but you were getting a lot of people in the water.
So that tells me hypnotism does work.
It might.
If I had been taught that, I would have done it. But I think like a lot of things in the church, we don't realize until much later how cringy something is.
Well, there's a lot of things. We read this story that it was like this really old missionary story that our mission president found that was called the Challenging and Testifying Missionary. And it was about this guy who just like, it was probably like in the 30s, just went up to someone's house and just like testified to them of the church and just like challenged them to baptism, took them out to the pond behind their house and baptized them like right away. And so our mission president was
to ask.
He was all about you testify, the Spirit will testify to them. You commit right then, you get them in the water, and then the rest will work itself out. So, I mean, that's what we did. And there were almost 200 missionaries in our mission, and everybody was doing that. And it was really successful as far as numbers went. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we were lucky if we probably kept 30% of the people that we baptized. And the majority were women and children too, which for the church isn't super helpful. So it was a good mission.
How many
missionaries
were native in your mission?
I would probably say, 50%? Probably about 30%, maybe a little bit more, 35 maybe. We're Filipino.
Did the American missionaries do better than the Filipino missionaries?
That's a good question, Gene. I don't know if there was a difference or not. We also had a lot of, well, I guess not a ton, but we had Samoan elders and Tongan elders, like not of Tongan or Samoan descent living in Utah, and they came. We had those too, but like I had a mission companion who was from Western Samoa, he would say, and he was huge. He was like 6'3", and he towered over me.
You felt big, probably being an American, and the Filipinos are kind of small.
That was the first place I ever felt tall, Gene, was when I got to the Philippines. Mm-hmm.
You dominated.
And then I look over and I've got this companion who dwarfed me. But he was good to have around because people were scared to mess with us. Yeah, people were scared to mess with us when he was there. But it was a good mission. I mean, it was hard at first, obviously, moving to a developing nation as a 19-year-old would be difficult for anybody, and just adjusting to mission life learning a new language. Yeah, it was tough, but I kind of settled in, and I was a good missionary. Like I said, I'm a good team player. Like, you just plug me in and I go and I get the job done. So I really didn't have a whole lot of leadership on my mission. I was a district leader for the last couple months I was there, and I trained 2 missionaries. So I got to train twice. But I wasn't a zone leader or anything like that. And I didn't necessarily aspire to it, but I think prestige wise, it would have been something cool. But I don't know. Our mission president was big on personality tests. He gave every missionary a personality test when he arrived. He used this color system. I think there's a book on it. So you could be like
red personality,
red, blue, yellow, and white were the colors. Okay. And so the leaders tended to be people who were red. Well, whites were like people who were apathetic, that didn't really care. Yellows were people who were more like funny. They liked humor and stuff. I can't remember what blues were. Blues were maybe emotional. Yeah, I don't know. You could get you could get mixes. And I was not red at all. And I think that
for white. And that's because, well, I don't know. The first time I tested as very red, but I don't know that I am. I don't think I knew myself very well, and so I think I was answering kind of how I wanted to see myself and like to see myself. I might be more red now than I ever was, because red's that is more leadership and also more confrontational. Whereas I was never confrontational in my brain. Maybe I was, but in real life,
I wasn't either.
Never. So white, I think, is that what you tested as? I could see you as white or yellow.
I was a mix. I was mostly yellow, maybe like yellow and white.
Okay.
Was my combo.
I see white as more of like the peacemakers rather than apathetic. But it was, to me at the time, the first time I took it, that seemed like the worst one to be. And later, when I knew myself better and I retook it, I did come out more on this like white side of things, but I have no idea. But they're imperfect. Personality tests are definitely imperfect, but they're always interesting to me, I think, and always will be, because you do, I think, learn about yourself, at least by by trying them out. So
was the mission president doing that to like match up missionaries better?
I think that was part of it, Gene. I think it was one, just to get to know, like, what do I have coming into the mission? Because if he had colors, I think that was his way of sorting. Okay, you're this type of missionary, you're going to be this type. And I think sometimes they use that to put people together. Maybe he wanted a red with a white because he'd get them to work more, perhaps. I don't know exactly what his system was, but he came back after his mission and became really rich. My mission president. He was one of the first. What's funny is I read this YouTube book that's actually written by a Mormon guy. He's one of the executive directors for The Chosen, that Christian show about Jesus's life.
Oh, okay. I think I know, but
I forget his name. I'm spacing on it. But my mission president was like one of the people he talked about in the book, that he made it big on YouTube, selling like I think it was something to clean your tongue. It was a dental product.
Okay.
And it was in the early days of YouTube, and he went to the college that he lived near, and he got some students to put together a campaign for him, and became like a multimillionaire from this. And it was crazy because I heard them say the guy's name, and I was like, that's my mission president's name. And I went and I looked, and I was like, holy shit, that's my mission president. So that was kind of a trip.
Daryl Evas or
Daryl, I think is his name. Yeah, Daryl. Mm-hmm.
Mine was already pretty wealthy. We made jokes about him having a helicopter pad. I don't know if he does or not, but it was just like he could if he wanted.
Most of them are sitting
Microsoft,
pretty at first,
and Apple, kind of a thing. So he like both sides, but yeah. Okay, so I think I already know the answer, but I'm if there isn't any more on your mission, I'm kind of guessing like when you come off your mission that you're still pretty chill. And I think overall, like a lot of there is this kind of a stereotype of missionaries coming back from missions and just being insufferable with just how I guess just neurotic and very anal about rules and about the gospel and everything. I wasn't. I was actually glad to be home, but I felt that my humanity was able to blossom a little bit more, my personal skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I did better. And I'm assuming that's where you were too. But also, what about testimony wise? Were you, was the mission wasn't anything that like struck at the foundation of your testimony, was it?
Like
oh
being
no,
being a district leader, it's all about the numbers. But if you guys had good numbers, that would make you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, honestly, if the mission did anything, it like solidified and made my testimony stronger. Like even to this day, I had like some really powerful experiences when I was on my mission that if I think about it with where I am now and try to, decipher like, well, what was this really? Because at the time, it's like, well, that was the spirit for sure, but now I look back on it and I go, well, it definitely was something I felt like it was a real experience that I had, but like, how would I look at it now? And I think it was just, what's the term? Like elevated emotion. Yeah, that's what I think it was, that you just kind of get caught up in the moment of things and you interpret them one way, and down the road you interpret them a different way. And so that's where I'm at. So I came home and, my testimony was better than before I left. But I wasn't like, I have to go continue my mission after my mission and convert people. I think I defaulted more to my chill personality. I had a lot of my friends. Time. Yeah. And I had a lot of friends who had left before me. So when I got back, they were all done and, they had kind of they'd gotten over the mission phase. And so when I moved in with them and I'm hanging out with them, it was just easy to kind of move on from mission mode.
And how did you choose a college?
I didn't want to be in Tucson, so I went up to like the Mesa area, and I didn't do I was okay in high school, but I wasn't like super smart, super good grades. And I didn't do any college before my mission. So I knew I was going community college. So I was like, I'm going to go to Mesa Community College since that's the area I wanted to live. So that's how I chose my college, Gene. What's cheap?
So you go to college and you open up the catalog and you can pick anything. You could be anything you want now. And so what did you choose?
I picked psychology at the time. As a freshman in college, I wanted to be a psychologist. So that's what I started working towards degree-wise.
Because of the money, or you wanted to help somebody?
Help. Okay. I think I've always been kind of a helper and like empathetic as far as like people's situations go. Like I remember being a kid, and if we'd see a homeless person, that really got to me, that like I didn't want to see someone in distress. So I think I wanted to do something in a helping field. I just didn't know exactly what that was going to look like.
It's a good start though, for sure. I want to know, and it's hard because I don't know the answer, so I'm not sure like where to hit, and I don't want to like fast forward through things. I'm curious about where your faith deconstruction, and you've talked about this a little bit, but maybe if you could again for our show, where the start of that kind of came into play. And I'm curious about also like what role your marriage plays into it, because you didn't do for college too, it sounds like you didn't even think about BYU to go, the Lord's school, and also to find a nice young lady, a Mormon, so yeah. So, where were you at like with that, and how did that play into things? Or like, did your choice of spouse play into your deconstruction, or vice versa?
Okay. So it's a weird story, because I don't know. I'm a weird ex-Mormon. So I did my undergrad. I went to Mesa Community College, and then I transferred to Arizona State. And I'm kind of a weirdo because I was dating the same LDS girl for like almost 5 years without getting married, which is just,
it is weird.
Very, very odd.
You might have been gay back then.
I mean, my family would joke that like, is he not pulling the trigger? But it was just weird because I wanted to get married. And we'd talk about it, but I think my girlfriend at the time just never got the spiritual confirmation that she was looking for.
You were just a placeholder for her.
I guess. But so it was like, God's not telling me to marry you, but I don't want to break up with you. And I think me just being kind of easygoing, like I loved her at the time and I was happy to be in the relationship. So we just kept doing that. And the only reason that we Oh, go ahead.
Because I feel like I know a lot of Mormon men who would have just kind of pulled the priesthood card and you know, I could have prayed for it and felt good, but obviously because obviously they feel good about it. It's this, you know, this girl they love. And I don't, and I just know like it's happened to a lot of my friends too, where a guy would just be like, well, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to ask and also imply that this is the spirit and this is what the spirit told me. So, you know.
Yeah. Anyway. For me, I'm not, unless I know the answer is yes, I'm not going to ask. That's
and talking about marriage was just an exercise, not really something that you were like saying, I have to do this or anything like that.
Yeah, it was never a we have to. It was definitely like, you know, we'd talk about it and potential future. And I'd always say like, I think I mean, we'd exchange I love yous. And so it was, I mean, it was a pretty mature relationship and most people would have gotten married. And in fact, my parents kept telling me like, shit or get off the pot. That's what my mom would always tell me. And I'd be like, I'm just comfortable where I'm at. So what broke up the relationship was I got accepted to graduate school at Auburn University in Alabama. So I had to move. And so that was finally the thing to make us go, okay, we're gonna
Tigers.
Go Tigers. Yeah. War Eagle, we say there, Gene. Not Roll Tide. We say War Eagle at Auburn. Right. So yeah, I packed up my stuff and I hopped in my car. I sold most of my possessions and I drove out to Alabama for graduate school. And that was the end of my relationship. Still a true believing member of the church, but with this fresh start, so to speak. I'd be, you know, in school with new people. There was a small student branch there that I went to the first Sunday I was there, and then I didn't go back.
So you probably hadn't seen My Cousin Vinny as a true believing Mormon, so you wouldn't know how dangerous it was to drive through Alabama.
No. I had a good time driving through Alabama. Actually, I had a good time. We went to Louisiana first and went to New Orleans, and that was a lot of fun. And
what'd you think? Did you think it was flat? Did you think, wow, this is flat?
What, New Orleans or Alabama? Yeah. Texas was pretty flat. That took a long time to drive across. You know, New Orleans was cool. It was the first place post-mission that the smell reminded me of my mission, the Philippines. The Philippines has this very distinct smell of like pollution and urine and
defecation and seafood.
Not defecation so much, but urine and like just kind of this dirty smell. Because in the Philippines, they don't have public bathrooms, so people would just pee all over the place. So there's like this smell of urine anywhere you go. And I was in New Orleans walking around, and I'm like, what is this? What's this smell? I smelt this before. I was like, oh my God, it smells like the Philippines here.
But don't the Philippines, don't they eat a lot of fish as well?
They do. Yeah, they do.
So, fish and urine and pollution.
There you go. Yeah, in the Philippines, they have this dry fish called tuyo that everybody makes. It's the worst smell I've ever had. It's the first thing I smelled when I got there, and I was like, I don't think I can live here for 2 years.
Do they make like a paste out of it or something? Actually, I think I'm thinking of like a shrimp paste. Actually,
you're thinking of bagaong, which is the shrimp, very salty shrimp paste.
It's so strong. I had like some roommates make at BYU Hawaii, and I remember coming out and just being like, what is, and I was used to a lot of different smells, but this one was one I was just like, what is that? I want to know what it is. So like and they're like, oh yeah, like it smells bad to us too, but like trust me, it tastes good. But I was like, I don't know, it was so bad. I felt like I don't. It's like it smells so bad. It hurts my feelings almost. And I've never had a smell like like, have that effect.
That's what the dried fish that they'd cook. That's what it would do to me, Maven. It was so bad.
So you're at Auburn, and are you focusing more now on a career by then?
Yeah.
Well, so I want to know why you didn't go back to like institute or church stuff, because to me, as a believing member, that would just be. That would be kind of a really big deal to just all of a sudden stop going.
Well, I did eventually. I would say that as I got closer to moving, so I graduated from Arizona State, I think in 2006, and then I took a year off where I just worked. partly because I hadn't prepped enough to take like the GRE to get into grad school, so I wasn't ready to apply yet, and then partially just to have a break from going to school and see what I could do with a bachelor's degree, which spoiler alert, not much. You can't do much with a bachelor's degree in psychology.
It's the same for anthropology.
Yeah.
That's my issue, yeah.
I'd say I probably got a little bit trunky as far as like church stuff went. Like I didn't go as often as I should, and I probably didn't read my scriptures quite as much as I should have. But I was still true believing and all in. But when I got to Auburn, and I just had this new start. I don't know. So I met all the people. I had a cohort of about 14 people that I was working really closely with in my master's program. And we all went out to the bar, like one of the first nights that we were there, and just had a really good time. And I was kind of like, you know what? I'm in a new place. I've drank before, like in high school, I had a little, but I was like, so I've done this before, and it's a new place, and nobody knows me here. And so I'll just,
throw back a couple.
Yeah, I'll just let loose. And I had a great time, and these people were so great that I went to school with, that I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna give this a shot and not worry about church so much. So pretty much the whole first semester that I was there at Auburn, I went that first Sunday, and then I never went again.
That's
Plus,
so
it's
interesting.
like a psychological experiment. What would it be like to be human for a little while?
That's kind of what it felt like, Gene. It did.
Normal.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to explore normalcy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess for my believing brain, that just that's not something I could have ever understood or think even thought of doing for myself. So yeah, these kind of stories like would always just kind of blow my mind. Like, how do you just? Especially if you went on a mission, it was just like, how could you, Cultch? Just
there was no deconstruction involved. Like I'm a totally believing member. I'm just kind of like like the Amish have their Rumspringa, where they're just like, we get to go and do stuff. And I was like, that's kind of what I considered it. Just like, I'm in this new place, and I'm just gonna be normal for a while.
That's fascinating.
But it only lasted a semester. Because I got back with the old girlfriend. She finally said, like, after a semester of being apart, she's like, I want to get married. And then I'm like, oh, well, I should probably tell you what I've been up to this semester. And she wasn't super excited about that, but she was kind of like, okay, I still do want to be together. So we got back together, and she's like, it was very like, you have to go back to church. You have to tell the bishop about all these things you've done. So I went back. Yeah. So then I went back, and I got back into church mode, and I was very
long distance, churchy. Right? You're still in Alabama?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did she move out there, or was she still in Arizona? And
you know what? She was planning on it until I told her what I had been up to. And then she didn't want to. It was like, I want to be back together, but I don't want, because of this, I'm not ready to come out and like fully commit.
Which was honestly smart of her, I think. I know a lot of women who would, just give up everything to go to where, and have nothing there. And then if it doesn't work out, just be really, really kind of screwed over. And so, yeah. So
we stayed together. I finished out my master's program, my master's program was interesting because it was only a year. It was an intensive year-long master's program that set me up as far as like my coursework and all the experience I needed to sit for my certification. And then when I finished there, I had to stay in Alabama and work for a year because I had taken, it's not like a grant, but something like that, where basically you're sponsored by an agency. They help pay for your schooling, and you get a stipend every month, but you agree to stay in state and work for them for a year. So I had to move to this little town in northern Alabama called Jacksonville, Alabama. And I worked up there for a year. So we were still together doing the long distance thing. But I'd say within about 2 or 3 months, she said, hey, this guy asked me out, and I think I'm going to go out with him. What do you think of that? And I was like, okay.
Chill.
And then like a month later, I see on Facebook, She's got that ring. She's got that ring. So then I was like, okay, well, I guess that's that. And then it's like, well, what do I do now? I don't know. So that put me in a weird
And how old
spot.
are you at this point?
This was
don't mind, or even
no,
like,
you're good. You're good. 28. This was about 2008. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a 28-year-old Mormon guy who should have been married at 21, who's living in rural Alabama by himself.
Yeah.
It's like, what
not
do
a
I do
lot
now?
of Mormons around. I think not a lot to pick from.
And same sort of thing. When I got there, I showed up at church. I'm attending because, I'm still with her and I'm trying to make everything work. And I even get called as the executive secretary in this small Alabama ward. And then this all happens. And I'm just kind of like, I think inside, I'm just like, F it. I don't want to do this anymore. So I just pieced out. I just stopped going.
I do think there's a reason, like there really is something to wanting people to get married young. And going back to what you said earlier, that it's the church loses a lot of its luster because it's just the same. It's day after day after day. And getting married, and then when you have children, that kind of re-plugs you back in, I think, because just everything about your life is different, and you really need that additional community, and you also need things for them to do. So it feels, I think, just as natural to keep going. And maybe there's enough going on that I know for adults with children, it can get boring too, but it seems like at much lower rates than when they're like us, like you and me, that end up aging up and starting to age out of young single adults. And there really isn't a lot. And I've seen that too in other, like even on my mission in the singles wards that I was in an area with a lot that were there for schools. There was a lot of good ones from, optometry, medical school, all kinds of things. And, there's always a few like really strong members, but, it was still kind of a struggling branch. And I think, that's why there's just not a lot of options. And people get kind of burnt out by then, I think, without the children and the spouse to kind of keep you in, which you almost got sucked into. So.
And so I'm sitting here in this situation where I'm in a family ward with like nobody single my age. So it's just like, what am I doing? So I started on the weekends going back down to Auburn to like visit friends and have like a little bit of a social life. And so that's where I've met my wife, who was in my program at Auburn. So I was hanging out with kids who were like the next year's class in the program, and some of my previous folks that were still there in the area. So that's how I met her, and we started dating long distance, and I did my time in Alabama, and then I moved back to Arizona, and we kept the long distance thing going. Okay. And then she had to stay in Alabama and do her year, and then she moved out to Arizona. And then that's when we got engaged and got married out there. Yeah. I had work. I worked out there, and then she got a job when she came out. She moved out for me, hoping, because we had talked about maybe marriage, but there was nothing concrete. But I think once we were together and it wasn't long distance anymore, it made sense. So that ruffled my wife's a never Mormon. She's not a Mormon woman. So that ruffled a few feathers. Yeah. Well, her parents are great. And she got to meet my parents when we were there, and my parents are very nice and very supportive, but they're also very Mormon. So there was a lot of like, they
were concerned, but not disappointed.
Yeah, there you go. Kind of like how they would have been if I hadn't wanted to go on a mission. They would have been very concerned, but they wouldn't have been too bad as far as disappointment goes. But so I got married to my wife, and we stayed in Arizona for about a year.
Testimony? So like, were you still thinking like maybe someday the celestial marriage, temple marriage for eternity, or was it like
I was once we got engaged, I actually for a little while was trying to get her to convert. Like I took her to church a couple times. When we'd have dinner and stuff, I'd like, can I say the blessing? So I was trying to like go back into Mormon mode and see what I could
read the Book of Mormon for a date.
No, I never read the Book of Mormon with her. But you know what, Gene? So I would do this, and it just, I don't know. It felt like I was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it just didn't feel right, and I just didn't want to do it. I'm like, I don't know.
She was happy being normal, and you didn't want her to be abnormal.
I think that was it. And so I just told myself, you know what, I can make this work. You know, I can be LDS and her not be LDS. And, you know, eventually I'll go back to church. And if we have kids, I'll figure it out how to get them baptized and do all this stuff. And we'll make it work and it'll be fine. And so that's kind of how I
pushed back against your efforts, or was it most like internal, like you just decided on your own, I don't like doing this? Or was she like, I'm getting a little uncomfortable?
No, I don't know if it was me just picking up on some of that, but it was more me. It didn't feel right. Cause I was like, hey, let's go to church. Hey, let's do this. And then eventually I stopped asking. You know, she never said like, hey, I don't like this. Hey, I don't want to do this. I think if I had like put an ultimatum down that like you either get baptized or we're done, I think she might have done it, but that would have been for the total wrong reasons, you know?
Right.
And so I didn't want to be I didn't want to be coercive.
You didn't even need a guitar to attract her to you.
No, so
that was cool. Just you.
All this music preparation, I didn't even need it, Gene.
I just think it's really great that you didn't want to be coercive, because I think it's and I don't want to say, a lot of times I do say like for men in the church, because they are used to getting their way, but women too. I think it's just a people thing. When you really want someone and when you really love someone, I think it's hard not to want to try to push and to get them in your life. So I think that's like very, very mature of you. I think beyond what most people are capable of. So yeah.
And I loved her, and so it's like I'm not gonna split up with this person just because she doesn't want to be part of my religion. And like I said, she never said that one way or the other. It just like it just didn't work. And so I made the decision to stop even attempting to push.
So she wasn't like an overt threat to your testimony, like where your parents were disappointed you weren't going to have a temple marriage, but were they thinking like she's gonna take him out of the church, she's gonna pull him out, or anything like that?
Well, for all my parents knew, I had already been inactive for a decent amount of time, so it wasn't like it was not the cause.
We're not going to hate on her as like she's the one that ruined our little boy's salvation.
He did that on his own. But I'm still deep down, like I still believe that the church is true. I'm just choosing not to participate in it. And that's how life went for probably the next 10 years. Was just being an inactive believing member. And
until it did, I guess until something happened.
Yeah, around, if you want to know that, it was basically around 2020 when the pandemic was starting. So I've got a young son at the time, and it's just kind of a scary time in the world if you take yourself back there. And I'm watching these press conferences that Donald Trump is doing. And back then I was a Republican. Like I'm a 2016 Donald Trump voter. I grew up Republican. I voted for Romney. I voted for John McCain. So I was.
So when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, did you almost think that was God helping?
I don't think it was God. I just thought it was hilarious. Right. I didn't think much of Donald Trump as far as like his ability to be president. I just liked that he was funny, and he said stuff that people normally wouldn't say, and I found that interesting. And I'd also been raised to hate the Clintons, so I think the opponent too. But anyway, I may have gone inactive as far as religion went, but I still identified very much Republican. Right. So anyway, in 2020, I'm seeing Donald Trump do these daily press conferences where he's telling people to inject themselves with bleach and different things like this. And listen, the pandemic scared the shit out of me when it happened. And I get this guy who I'm expecting to like get up and say things to make me feel better. And I'm getting the impression that he's trying to kill me with these ideas. And that's when I'm just like, I guess that was the emperor has no clothes moment. And that's when
both matter. Who's president does kind of matter. Yeah.
And I don't mean this to be a shit on Donald Trump thing, because I know there are not just Mormons, but I know there are ex-Mormons who voted for him and support him. And if that's what you did, that's fine. So I'm not trying to pile on. I'm just giving you my 2 cents on what happened. Was I lost a lot of trust in him based on his behavior, and that made me take a closer look at like what do I feel, what do I believe about things, where do my values line up, and the closer I looked at that, as far as like LGBTQ stuff and things like that, I didn't really line up with Republicans anymore. So I kind of shifted my politics, deconstructed that. I would have said I was probably more of an independent. I don't know if I said I would have gone full woke scold liberal, like some people like to say out there. But enough that I was like, F
You're
this
not a
guy.
Psychologist.
No, I'm not a psychologist.
Well,
even though my undergrad is in psychology.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if part of that had something, because in order to do psychology, you have to realize science is part of it. And people are what they are. It's not like people choose to be
right
homosexual or anything like that. It's just the way things work out. It happens all throughout the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
Right.
And a big thing for me, if I go back a little bit. So when I was in Alabama post-graduate school, but when I was working, my boss was a lesbian and her partner worked at the same place that we worked. And they were two of the nicest people I have ever met. They were super welcoming. They invited me over to their house for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, because I'm just this guy who's living by himself with really no friends or people in this small town in Alabama. And they were some of the best people I knew. And it was my first like real experience being up close and personal and interacting on a daily basis with people who weren't straight. And so all these ideas I had about it, while I would have considered myself pretty tolerant of gay people, this kind of taught me that like a lot of my preconceived notions and things that I was raised with, like love the sinner, hate the sin type of stuff, was kind of bullshit. And I even had one of
true interest in you. They weren't trying to love bomb you so that you would become lesbian as they are.
Right. It didn't work. I mean, inside I kind of already was a lesbian, Gene, but yes, I didn't. Yep. They didn't turn me gay by any means. But one of them asked me about Prop 8, because that was a thing that was happening at the time. They're like, I remember what she said. She's like, well, what's up? Because they knew I was LDS. And they're like, what's up with your church in California? And I'm so out of the loop that I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, well, they're trying to keep gay marriage from being a thing, and they're doing this and this and this. And I'm just like, wow, I didn't know that. Just knowing the church, they're very into traditional marriage. So maybe that's the reason why. So here I am trying to like explain the church's position to this lesbian woman. And the whole time that the words are coming out of my mouth, it just feels gross. And so I think these seeds of like coming around on that side, before I ever took that R away from my name, it was kind of already there. I just hadn't looked at it closely enough.
R by your name just started to become rationality.
There you go. That might have been it.
What's interesting to me about your story is because a lot of members left during COVID. So but that's kind of like the only thing maybe in common with most that do leave at this time. I mean, their politics was part of it for a lot, but for a lot, it was just the fact that like of not going to church anymore. But you'd already been there. You'd already been like not going to church.
I'd seen life without church,
so
and it was pretty good.
Yeah. So
which is why I'm a weirdo, because a lot of people were just like, they stepped away and realized that like, man, we don't need it, and left. Or some people have this like, I read this and I knew I was done. I had this experience and I knew I couldn't stay anymore. With me, it's it's like I kind of pieced out from the church, but stayed in here.
Political, kind of political COVID. Yeah. Like I'm going to look into these things now. Whereas for most members, it was like church history or polygamy doctrines, LGBTQ stuff.
It turned out to be church history for me, but what it took was deconstructing my politics to give me the courage to deconstruct my religion. It's like, well, if I could look at these other things and change a big part of who I was, what's keeping me from looking at stuff that the church has told me not to look at? Because I was very good about following that rule of staying away from non-church approved sources. And I had, even when the CES letter came out, I had a sister and her husband who both read it, and they pieced out of the church. And that wasn't even enough to get me interested in reading it. I was like, I don't care. I just wasn't interested in the church.
How did you feel about them leaving while you're not active, but you do have a testimony still?
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I was sorry for them.
No. I didn't like it. I thought bad things happened in their lives as a result of I thought they would be happier being faithful members of the church.
It's so
and I don't
ironic.
know, honestly, to this day, I don't know whether that's true or not, but like, that's definitely how I felt. Even not wanting to go myself, that's how I felt.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, but not uncommon. Yeah. So
what was your historical dive that happened? How that happened?
Vogel. I was like, what can I watch? I was looking around like, all right, what's going to be my first thing? I don't know. I never had a desire to read the CES letter. I have a copy here in the room. I've still never read it to this day. I know it was very powerful for a lot of people, but it wasn't for me. For me, it was, I found videos of Dan Vogel talking about early Joseph Smith history.
Not John DeLynn.
Well, I think it was Dan on with John,
right,
having his interviews.
And then,
so I think I knew of John. I think I'd heard of him like around the time that the whole Kate Kelly women priesthood stuff was going on. Yeah, I'd heard his name in the news, so I was kind of aware of him, but I never watched Mormon stories prior to that. But Dan talking about all this early Joseph Smith history, the treasure digging, the peepstones, I'm just like, this was all new to me. And I'm like, what is this? Because I loved Joseph Smith. I had a really strong testimony of Joseph Smith. I thought he was the man. And then it's like they're telling me about this person I've never met before. Like all the skeletons in the closet are coming out. And I'm just like, what? Is it this guy or is it this guy? Is it both of these guys? And I don't know. I sat on that. I watched all the stuff he did about Joseph Smith's early life and just hearing all these different things.
Dan Vogel's just saying, this is what the history says.
Yeah.
It's not anti-Mormon anything. It's just history.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you trust him? Because typically when it's so different from what we're told growing up, that depending on where you are, the initial reaction would be, this is bullshit and somebody's completely making it all up. But you didn't go there. There was at least something in this that was like, there's maybe something to this, or did you know? Like, did you believe him outright that he's talking about, or was it like, I need to find out for myself if he's really actually talking about real stuff?
It sounded about right. I don't know. Something felt right when it's going over, even though it felt wrong. It felt right too. And maybe it's the fact that I had kind of been out of the church for 10 years, that I was in a place where it wasn't going to, the defenses weren't going to come up and be like, that can't be true. That's not the Joseph Smith I knew. It was more just like, hold on, I thought he was this, but now I'm hearing this. Tell me more, And so it was an accumulation of things. It's like, what else did he do? And what?
So my dad he likes to collect really old books. And so it was just in our house when I found this really old church, like history book or lesson. It was a study book. It was for kids or like teenagers or something, but and I don't remember the year now anymore, but it was very, very old. And it had interesting stuff in there that I had never read or heard elsewhere about Joseph Smith. And they had talked about one of the things, it alluded to the treasure digging in there. And because it was a faithful source that I had read when I was young, that was what kind of primed me later when I started to hear about it, that it was familiar to me and already like a safe piece of information. But so which
it would almost say like he dabbled in this. He dug for somebody, but then he moved on.
What kids do, kids are interested in buried treasure.
Everybody was doing it.
Yeah, and people, when they found out that Joseph had golden plates, they wanted money from it because of a silly little bargain that they made as kids, that if any of them ever found treasure in the mountains, they would split it.
Yeah, nothing to see here.
And then nothing to see here, exactly. And then moving on. But I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then so that was what kind of primed that for me later when I got like the full story of it. So okay, but back to Dan Vogel. Oh, sorry, did you have a question?
Just real quick, I started thinking that we really only know like 7 hours of Joseph Smith's life that we hear over and over again. You know, like they'll say, here's a little quote from maybe a 2-hour speech, but we only know the quote, right? And so, and then he got tarred and feathered. Well, we learn about that in just a little, you know, couple sentence thing, but
because he was so righteous.
Yeah, because Satan was after him, right? And so there was so little we knew about him, really. And so it made sense to me that there would be. So when I first started hearing stuff about him, that made him more real, more of a human, more of somebody I can identify with. I didn't even think at first that it was necessarily bad that he was doing these extra things. It was just like, oh, you know, I made mistakes too. You know, maybe I don't know. Anyway. And so yeah, you know, he had a life other than just giving a sermon every now and then where we get a blurb from.
Interesting. So you're like, this is cool. Where
at first it was like, just cool.
This is troubling.
I was like, what the hell? And it was just one thing on top of another. You know, it's the treasure digging, and then it's how he translated the Book of Mormon. So the stone that he used to find treasure, which he never found, that's what he was using to translate the gold plates. And it's like, what the hell? I was raised with the plates were in front of him and the Urim and Thummim, so that was different. And I mean, then we get into his polygamy that I didn't know about, because I knew about all the Brigham stuff because I've got this ancestors, you know, that there's a polygamous line that runs through the family that we knew about. But I didn't know Joseph Smith did. And then I didn't know. You remember
in priesthood hearing Joseph saying, I'm accused of having 7 wives, and I look around and I only see one. He only had one.
Yeah. And I knew nothing about the Nauvoo expositor. Like, that was crazy. It's like he ordered people to burn down a printing press. So it was just like all these. And once I started going, like I went full rabbit hole. I could not get enough. And so I think after a while, I was just sitting in bed one night, kind of thinking about all this stuff, and the idea, like the thought just came into my head that like, I don't think this is true. And then I just sat with that, and I was like, I don't think this is true. And then I'm like, it's not true. And it was almost like it was a reverse testimony. Like it was a testimony killer right there. And and it was odd because I just sat with it. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean now? Like, how do I process that? I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel uneasy. It was almost like a relief. Like I was just like, okay, and now we move forward and we see what this is.
Yeah, the beards I had in college were okay.
Yeah, the beard I couldn't grow in college was okay, G.
No, yeah, that's right.
No, I think I relate to that a lot. Once you allow yourself that thought that that it could genuinely be untrue. And I
don't
mean,
think I'd ever thought of that before.
Yeah,
I don't think I'd ever let myself think that.
Like as a mental, but not as an honest mental exercise as a believer. Yeah. But like when that possibility really does land as a possibility for you, it just seems like everything just immediately crystallizes. You know, we talk about seeing through a glass darkly. Not anymore. Like now it's just like, oh no, this is
clear.
The window, and like now everything makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting because I thought, you know, when this moment kind of happened for me, I was also a little bit stunned at how unemotional I was about it for something that I had been so into my whole life. But I think honestly, I think it's the shock of it. It is a big shock, I think, mentally, whether it like it feels like it or not. It's a lot. And so yeah, it's just this initial like, yeah, what next, and what does this mean? And you know, for me, I was standing in my kitchen saying like, I'm fine. This is fine. I'm fine. This is okay. It's no big deal. Like this has been my whole life. Every decision I've ever made has had something to do with this. And it's not true, but that's okay. That's okay. You know, like I'm fine. I'm really fine. Anyway, but the relief thing, that's something else too, because I especially for me, I had a sense, even though I was trying to prevent it, I had this kind of building sense that I was losing my testimony. And so it's almost like I'm trying to hold on to it like sand, but like it's still kind of slipping through my fingers. And so while I had that sense, you know, of that building up and not also being simultaneously unable to prevent it or stop it, it's almost and you see this too, like kind of with a lot of people realizing it or getting to this point where they're having their first major issue, this double down, this clenching, this like just this tightening, and then this fear comes. I think when a lot of people will say like, what if I become an atheist? That just seems so dark. And so just everything's going to be ruined. There's so much fear and buildup. But then in that realization, when the moment actually happens, relief is what I felt also. And I've heard so many other people. It's just, I don't know. It's like this tense, like you're holding on, to the ledge, and it's so scary. The thought of letting go, you're going to like fall into this abyss. And then once you do, like the ground was 2 inches below you, And so when you finally let go, it's just like, oh, I'm okay. I'm still standing here. It's actually not all that different. And now, I feel lighter anyway. It's interesting that happened to you too. Again, not everyone has everything in common, but this is a very common feeling, that relief. Yeah.
And I'm aware that for me, my crisis of faith was much easier than a lot of people have to go through, because some people have this happen when they're in a marriage with a faithful person, or when they're living with parents who are true believers, and it's going to mess their family up. Dropping this bomb. So it's a lot harder for them to deal with it. For me, it was just kind of like when I went, okay, what do I do now? I'm like, well, like what's going to change? Pretty much nothing is going to change. Like,
and
I'm going to
you're able to talk to your wife about these things as you're doing it. You're not trying to hide anything from her.
No. And I don't know if I was like, hey, I'm watching all this stuff. Because again, like Mormonism was never really a topic we'd sit and chat about. If anything, I think she was.
Can't understand if she's not been into it, that she wouldn't even know what this information means to you.
If anything, she was probably worried that I would go back to church and what that would mean for her. Because if I did, and started to become active, what does that mean for her? What does that mean for our kiddo? Because obviously if I became active, I would want him to be going. And so I don't know. I think that was her big fear. So when I told her that I like finally decided I was done, she was very happy about that, just because I think that meant our future was predictable, and there weren't going to be these potential roadblocks or hurdles that were going to come up if I decided to go back to church.
Honestly, I think you're the most dangerous kind of Mormon that to marry for a never mo is a Jack Mormon, because
probably and you can go back at any time.
Yeah, and the double.
You could have some good home teachers.
That's true.
You could have some good home teachers that get you active.
Yeah.
Well, Gene, the missionaries almost got me a couple times. There were a couple times that they came knocking at the door, and I let them in and I chatted with them. And they even pulled hey, we don't get to teach very much. So would it be possible, like if we came once a week and maybe just did the discussions with you? And we set it up for them to come, and they never came. They missed their chance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They could have been giving you a lesson, and they could have touched you on the shoulder.
I could have been got that personal touch during a testimony, and
hypnotized again.
Yeah, I could have been back at church.
Any life event can trigger a Jackmo to start coming back too. So I mean, the birth of your child could have done it, but also at any time losing somebody,
a death in the family,
to you, just any kind of a major happening. So really, Jack Mormons can be a ticking time bomb, where just any normal life event that happens, because it happens to everybody somewhere along the way, does end up like kind of clicking them back in. And I think some of the saddest stories that I read on like the Exmo Reddit will come from people who are nevermos, who are trying to figure out, like they're there trying to figure out what's happening with their family and what to do about it, because the double down can be so hard that a lot of times it'll blow up their marriages too. And so but your wife had no idea, right? Potentially that's where it could have gone, although I guess she did probably sense it and worry about it anytime these little things happen with the missionaries.
She might have, but well, I mean, they were coming. I don't know that she even knew that they came.
Okay.
But she was, I mean, sometimes like the elders quorum president would show up, and she was never a fan. Even now, we'll get the missionaries that come by sometimes, and she's like, "They're here, make them go away."
How old is your child? Because when you've got a kid from a mixed faith family that's starting to get to that 8 years old mark, that's usually when you'll
he's
see the
around
ramp
there.
up? Yeah,
He's
he was
around
getting
there.
close.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're leaving your whole identity's gonna go away, and you start to engage a little bit in the ex-Mormon world.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't say it's my whole identity, but I think my Mormon identity that was still part of me was like, okay, I'm gonna shed that skin and like take what I am and what else can I add to it. But yeah, so I'm out on the East Coast. I didn't have Mormon friends to begin with out here that I was gonna lose. So that's not a big deal. But I didn't really have a ton of people that I could lean on support wise. It's not like I'm out in Utah and there's just a plethora of expos that are out there. So I looked for community online. So I made an account on Twitter that was my Cultural Hall account. And I just started looking for people and sending out friend requests and just trying to get myself involved, started commenting on stuff. And that was kind of where my Exmo persona was born, over on Twitter. I think it was around the same time as you, Maven, because we were in the early days, you and I were chatting with each other.
I had a brief fling, and it was just way too fun to troll Mormons there, and just so easy because I was saying this to you, the character limit, it makes it harder for Mormons to try to go on these long explanations to try to say something to make bad things sound not as bad as they are. But when you have a limited amount, you just you have to be direct, and direct usually looks really bad. And so I had people say like, you're wasting your time. And if you're trying to win arguments on Twitter, or if you're actually trying to change somebody's mind, yes, that would be a waste of time. But I was just there for a good time, and it was easy to be had. And so I had to like eventually completely stop and go off after. I think I was there maybe a month or two. A bit. I was spending so much time there. But you and I were commenting a lot. That's also where I met, and I assume you also became aware of someone that you frequently cover more than anyone else I know, I think. But like it all started from there, and it was a good time.
And at some point you pick up a guitar again and you start playing around.
Yeah, so I was over there just, I don't know, getting my feet wet, I guess, in the Exmo space. And somewhere along the line, I think somebody asked me, I started making like hymns. So I would take like, I don't know, just different hymns. I would erase the lyrics and then I would make my own and then put the sheet music up. And people thought that was funny. And then I think someone asked me to do a parody song of something. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a shot. And I think that's where my whole parody song timeline came into play, was like, oh, people seem to like this. Maybe I could do some of that. What's funny, Gene, is that I don't even really do anything musical on those. I'm just I call it Exmo karaoke. Because when I put it together, I'm just ripping the original track. I'm throwing it into GarageBand and I'm recording vocals over it and then putting a video with it and putting it out. So although I could play guitar with it, I'm not.
Okay. So you don't play the guitar with it. Okay. So you just twist the lyrics around and you sing familiar songs that you think, hey, I wonder if this song can be made into a little ditty that would tease some TBM friends.
Yes, and not even that it would tease TBM friends. That just, I listen to music a lot. I love music. And as I'm listening to it, sometimes just different lyrics will pop into my head. And I think because I have ex-Mormonism on my mind, sometimes they tend to be themed that way. So if I get, if I get one that I like, I'm like, okay, I'll write that down and then I'll go and play with it. And Twitter wasn't really a space for that. I don't know. That stuff didn't really work over there. So that's when I jumped over to TikTok, and that's kind of where I started posting those more. So I think that's when I would say I kind of became a content creator, was probably over there.
Have you done a song with I've Got My Mind Set on You? Have you done anything with that?
Yeah. It's called The Mormon Church Is Not True.
The Mormon Church Is Not True. Right.
I'll have to send that one to you, Gene. I've got that.
I think I've heard it, but you could do another one and you can do it Joseph Smith. I got my mind set on Jews. because the
because
Jews
the
came.
American Jews. Yeah.
Got
Yeah,
my
that could work. I
mindset
bet
on
I gave
Jews.
you an idea too. I bet people probably are reaching out all the time. Like, you should do this. You should do
Yeah,
this.
they
That's
do
kind
it.
of part of the.
I used to be really into it where I would, and what made it a little bit easier was that on TikTok, as far as music goes, you can only do about up to a minute. Otherwise, they're going to mute it. So I just need lyrics for like a verse and a chorus, and I could just put that together real quick and put it out with a video. So I was doing like 3 or 4 of those a week at a time, just shooting those out. And, a lot of them I look back on now, they kind of suck, but every once in a while I would strike gold. So there's some good ones that are out there.
Do you have to pay for rights to do some things for longer ones?
Well, no, because there's on YouTube, I've got some that are full length, like the entire song. Usually what happens over there, Gene, is you just get it just lets you know that the music is copyrighted. Yeah, you can't monetize off it. Occasionally you can do profit sharing where they'll share the proceeds with you, but then instead of making 0, you make like 3 cents. So it's really, you might as well not be getting paid to do it. So I think the fact that those are not lucrative is probably why I don't do them that often these days.
Did you ever plan on becoming like a bigger content creator, or like was this was just fun stuff?
I think there was like a seed in my head that was planted that like maybe I could do that someday. Because I consumed all the ex-Mormon content when once I figured out I was done, I was like, all right, I'm watching like every Mormon Stories episode. I loved the early Radio Free Mormon stuff. I loved Mormonism Live. That was the early days of that. That's where I first learned about like Cardin and Kwaku and Brad. And that's probably where my love of hate watching those guys started, was hearing, because I can still remember. Did you
see any of the original episods of Tits? Or this is the show?
No, I heard them talking about that in the acronym for it. Yeah. But RFM was calling him Kwaku. He was getting his name wrong because he didn't know. And I'm like, who is he talking about? And that was my first introduction to Kwaku, which is crazy. It's come full circle, because if you were watching my my Michelle Stone interview the other night, Kwaku was in the chat.
I do remember that. Yeah.
He I was mean to him on Twitter, and I got to apologize.
You gave him kind of an apology too, I think, right? You're like,
yeah. I was pretty mean to Kwaku on Twitter.
Yeah.
I was.
No, those original shows are all gone now, because they did get pulled fairly quickly. But I saw them. I watched them like in full live, and I was stunned.
Although Cardin has said he's trying to get the rights to them and trying to put them out on Ward Radio's channel. Yeah. So Tits might come back, Maven. There may be Tits after all.
Yeah.
If Cardin has anything to do with it, there will be Tits.
I think I have the files. I look around. If you want to see them, I can. If I have them, I'll see if I can share them. Yeah,
that'd be cool.
But anyway, he does have them in full. But yeah.
Anyway, I'd watch all these content creators, and I think of John and RFM and Bill as the big ones in the space, and I never thought that I could be like on that level, but I thought it might be fun to be a name that people know in the space and create content. I didn't think it would get to what it is now, where I have like a YouTube channel and I'm putting out weekly like live shows and stuff. I never thought I'd go that route. I very much preferred to be off the camera than on the camera. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised with where it's at right now, to be honest.
I think we need fun though, because the deconstruction, I want to say that like it is a phase. I would say a distinct kind of like leaving religion phase is just tearing down everything that you used to have before, because it's been built up your whole life. So you kind of have to, and then I would say that a lot of things that we talk about can be really heavy, especially if we're getting into things like polygamy or child abuse stuff. There've been a lot of times where being in ex-Mormon content for me has been heavy because of just the subjects. And there've been times where I wanted or wished I could watch something that was lighthearted and more fun. That's like Brother Jake. I really liked, it's just that kind of stuff.
Talk about Brother Jake, and they say I have a little bit of that vibe.
Yeah. I think that's what you have. And it's that unfortunate Brother Jake had I guess a health issue that kind of brought, took him out of the game kind of early with that kind of stuff. But I feel like you're kind of coming in that kind of atmosphere, and it's appreciated, and it's very much needed, I think, for healing. Humor is important for healing. So
good.
Yeah.
No, there are some people out there that would say I'm not funny at all, and I tend to agree with them. But I do like to try, and if people find my stuff funny, I like that, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so my son would send me some of your TikToks. And,
oh, for real?
Yeah, and then also Mormonish was your big break into the podcast.
Rebecca, was the first person to get me to go on a show.
Yeah, and so we got to see more of you there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was good. So we'll try to put a link to your first Mormonish appearance, and then people can we'll have a link to your podcast, because you were doing content for other people. And then how long ago did you start your own channel?
I started in April of last year, so I'm coming up on a year now. And what helped me out, Gene, what helped me out was that I had all this material that I'd made on TikTok that I just started putting over here. So all the parody songs, like one a day, I would put over here. So I was able to get to, I think, 1,000 subs within about 3 months, which was pretty good. And if you're in the YouTube channel game, like that's the milestone you want to get to. So I was able to get there pretty quick. And then once I was there, I was like, well, okay, now I got to start doing some longer form content. And so that was kind of tricky at first, because I didn't know how to make stuff longer than like a minute or two. But I kind of got into it and got used to it. And I've got a decent catalog of material now that's on my channel.
I think so. I think you found your groove.
Do you remember who your first guest was for like an interview type show?
The interview type show didn't happen until just recently, probably like November of last year. I remember my first like long form video that I put out was my Breaking Brad episode, which is a play on Breaking Bad, which was all about Brad Wilcox. That's a fun 20 minutes if you have it to go watch that video. I'm trying to remember. I think so. When I started doing live videos, the first one was just me playing parody songs. And then I'm trying to remember who the first person I had on was. It might have been
more like reaction kind of type videos, right? And clips from other apologists.
Yeah, I had started doing hate watches of like Thoughtful Faith and Ward Radio and people like that. But again, that was my kind of behind the scenes stuff that I would just make and put up. But once I started doing like a weekly live show, I think Jim Bennett might have been my first person.
Sounds right to me. Yeah.
But again, I know Jim from Twitter. Like I met him back in the day. So I'm taking these relationships I've had from a long time ago and being like, hey, Jim, you want to come on my show? And Jim's great. He's just like, cool. Jim's coming on this week. He's going to be on this Thursday. Him and Colby are going to be on the show. So,
okay. But wait, what about Mormon, the Midnight Mormons? Aren't you doing a review of the debate with FM?
So that is on the docket. It's probably a couple of weeks out, but I'm going to be doing an episode that's just covering the Radio Free Mormon Midnight Mormons debate that they had a couple years back. And if people have no clue what I'm talking about, get ready, because you'll get to enjoy it for the first time.
Yeah, it's funny how like just things live and like die quickly on the internet. So I think there's a whole new swath of deconstructed ex-Mormons that missed out on all the drama behind the scenes for it too, and then just there's some pretty great snippets from it. So
what's reiterated that to me, Maven, is that with Nathan Hinckley, so he's a newer name and a newer person in the space.
The Bishop's interview.
Yeah, the Bishop's interview. So when I'm talking with Nathan, I'm talking to him like he's a seasoned ex-Mormon, and I'm referencing people and things from back in the day, and he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. And I'm like, oh yeah. It's like, and there are just people deconstructing. Like today, there are probably people who have deconstructed and are consuming ex-Mormon content for the first time, and it's interesting to keep that in mind. And that's why I like to go back sometimes and repost old videos, because there's a whole new audience that's seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Which is
I think
cool.
Tits would be great for that too, Ben, if I've got it and I can share it with you.
I love that.
That's some really it's so bad.
I like to see anything that's got like old school Cardin and Kwaku. I love it.
Yeah. I'll look around for it. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, we've been going for an hour and a half now, I think, so we probably should wrap up. I don't know, are there any like final points to your story that we missed, or any final questions from you,
Not
Gene?
really. I think we spent most of the time on the origin story, which is good because I don't think people really know that. Like, I'll drop details about it here and there, but I don't think anybody has really heard it in a linear way that we have put it out today. I think most people who are probably watching and know who I am are familiar with the current stuff within the last year. They're probably like, I know that. I know the Breaking Brad. That's cool. I know the hate watches. That's fine. But like, what? Tell me more about this guy. So I think we accomplished that.
I hope so. I hope, and I think our audience will enjoy it. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for squeezing us in.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking me, and I'm glad you guys could accommodate and do it on such a short schedule.
Sure. And so for everybody in the audience that's still awake, because Cultch promised that he would be very boring. And so if anybody's still awake, thanks for watching all the way to the end. And Maven
like and
I
subscribe
enjoyed
and all that stuff. Oh, you did good. Okay.
Yes.
I didn't bore you guys.
No, not at all.
Good.
We like listening to people's stories. And so everybody like and subscribe, do the things as I say. Sharing is caring. That's another thing. And have a great rest of 2025. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.